All right, hey guys, how you doing? Good morning. We're going to be doing our lesson today on the African independence movement that took place after World War II. Remember, last time we talked about the Indian independence after Gandhi had fought for India's independence through non-violent means. Remember that? Remember we talked about how Muslims went to eastern Pakistan and western Pakistan, and in the middle, most of the Muslims were around, and there was a lot of turmoil and a lot of massacres, right? Because people were changing places to live. Well, a lot of these new governments were starting to take place after World War II when colonialism started to fall apart in Africa, and that's where we're moving on next. We're going to be talking about African imperialism. I'm going to show you this video, and I hope that it's going to give you the rundown of what the lesson is about today. Okay, and then we're going to go over some of our goals. We're going to do help you out with one of the reading segments, and then hopefully as we continue on this lesson, we're going to be exploring solutions to the problem of genocide. So I hope you guys are prepared. You guys are ready. You got your materials. Everyone has a book. So you're going to be turning to page 295 on this one, okay? So let's just watch this video here.
After World War II, the continent of Africa began to experience dramatic changes. The immense destruction and debts that European nations had suffered during the war had lessened their power. As the economic power of Europe weakened, calls for independence in Africa grew. Let's take a look at the different ways African countries won independence by looking at Ghana, Kenya, and Algeria. Ghana, located on the coast of West Africa, was named the Gold Coast by its colonial ruler, Great Britain. Ghana had an abundance of deposits of gold, iron ore, and diamonds. Although these minerals generated great wealth for Great Britain, native Ghanaians both benefited little from them. These inequalities frustrated many African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, leader of Ghana. In addition to the economic imbalance, political, social, and educational inequalities were rampant. Facing growing internal resentment as well as international criticism, Britain decided to leave Ghana. The British organized elections in 1951, which Nkrumah's party won handily. 6 years later, in 1957, Ghana became the first sub-Saharan colony in Africa to gain independence. This inspired other African colonies in Africa to seek their own freedom. Ghana enjoyed a peaceful transition to independence, but other nations faced larger hurdles. Kenya in East Africa was another British colony, a rich colony with a vast amount of fertile land. It attracted large numbers of European settlers after the war. The Kikuyu, the largest ethnic group in Kenya, had once occupied the fertile highlands. As laws were passed in the colony to limit the power of most blacks, white settlers came to dominate the Kenyan highlands, which frustrated the native Kenyans. These frustrations resulted in an armed uprising called the Mau Mau Revolt. Some Kikuyu resorted to guerrilla warfare, which resulted in the deaths of white settlers. Thousands of Kikuyu were also killed in the uprising. Jomo Kenyatta, a Kikuyu nationalist leader, was suspected of being a leader of the Mau Mau movement and was jailed by the British. By 1960, the revolt had been put down, but Britain ended up granting Kenya its independence 3 years later. Kenyatta became Kenya's first prime minister. Algeria in North Africa had the most difficult time transitioning to independence. Starting in 1848, Algeria had been considered to be part of France, not a colony, and the French, stung by their recent loss of Vietnam, were not keen on giving up Algeria too. Algeria had vast deposits of oil and natural gas, which added to Algeria's importance, and it had a large European population as well. Algerian nationalists engaged in guerrilla warfare to fight the French, a struggle that lasted from 1954 to 1962. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives, and in the end, France decided to leave the region. Algeria gained its independence in 1962, at which point almost 1 million settlers fled and headed to Europe. Think about the independence movements in Africa. Do you think independence was inevitable? Why or why not?
Okay, so I like that question. Do you guys think, does anybody have an opinion about why if independence would have been inevitable? Okay, and maybe you're thinking, okay, after World War II, after the high cost of the war, and in Europe they had to rebuild. They couldn't really take care of colonizing Africa anymore. So with the uprising and with the movement for independence there, the European nations, just like they did in India, they said, hey, you want to be independent? Here you go, you can have it. However, there were some problems. What were some of the problems that came about? You had white settlers coming into Kenya. You had investors from people with money coming in and taking over the land so they could basically capitalize on the resources in that area, limiting the people's really their wealth of their land. Okay, they weren't able to take advantage of those resources. Okay, so that's going to lead to some problems, obviously. Okay, let's go on. And what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to help you guys out to read in this first section. We're going to summarize how African nations won independence. So hopefully we're familiar with summarizing, right? Looking at the main idea, trying to weed out, okay, what's the important information, okay? And then we're going to draw conclusions from that. We're going to analyze the issues that face African nations. Certain countries had different issues. We're going to look at them, and then also what paths they took. And finally, we're going to identify the examples of summarizing and summarize the reasons for ethnic conflict and genocide in African nations, okay? Raise your hand if you can tell me what genocide means. Genocide. Okay. Good. It's very much. It's the killing of entire people based on their race or ethnicity. Good. All right, we're going to go to the next one. And you should have this in your book. This is the readings directly from the book. I'm going to play the audio. As you guys read along, I'm going to ask you guys with paper and pencil that you guys would outline. Okay, so as you see what's in red, you're going to outline the section. You're going to put the heading, and then you're going to tell me what important information that you can find underneath that heading. And then that's going to be your first bullet. And then we're going to go on. There's probably about 5 sections here that we're going to go through. Okay, so let me just play the tape really quick. And then we're going to answer our guided reading questions at the end. So after your outline.
You have cups? Oh, just checking. Okay.
Thank you, sir. So we're fine. All right. Let's see.
The New Nations of Africa. In 1945, 4 European powers, Britain, France, Belgium, and Portugal, controlled almost all of Africa. Only Egypt, Ethiopia, Liberia, and white-ruled South Africa were independent nations. World War II sparked a rising tide of nationalism in Africa. Japanese victories in Asia shattered the West's reputation as an unbeatable force. Also, African troops who had fought for the Allies were unwilling to accept discrimination when they returned home. Nationalists also won support among workers who had migrated to the cities to work in war industries. After the war, most European nations lacked the resources and will to fight to hold on to colonies. Faced with nationalist demands, Britain and France introduced political reforms that they thought would gradually lead to independence. But they soon discovered that they could not control the pace of change. Starting in the late 1950s, they gave up direct control of most of their colonies. In countries with large settler populations, however, independence was thwarted for years. In the new nations, crowds celebrated their freedom, while bands played new national anthems. However, even as independence celebrations took place, African nations faced tough challenges. A geographically diverse continent. Africa is the world's second largest continent. It has the world's largest desert, the Sahara, in the north, and the smaller Kalahari Desert in the south. as well as fertile coastal strips in North and South Africa. Savannas, or grasslands with scattered trees, make up much of the interior. Tropical rainforests cover Central Africa's Congo Basin and coastal West Africa. Africa's population has long been concentrated in the most fertile areas, such as the highlands of East Africa. Like people in other parts of the world, however, millions of Africans are migrating to cities. About 40% of Africans live in fast-growing cities. Africa has rich deposits of minerals such as gold ore, copper ore, and diamonds. However, these resources are distributed unevenly across the continent. Some African nations produce valuable cash crops, including coffee and cacao. Some regions also have large oil reserves. European powers had established colonies in Africa to tap into these natural resources. Nationalism leads to freedom. Most nationalist leaders were Western educated. Many were powerful speakers whose words inspired supporters. Kwame Nkrumah in Gold Coast, Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya, and Leopold Senghor in Senegal were skilled organizers. Nationalist leaders organized political parties. In the cities, parties published newspapers, held mass rallies, and mobilized popular support for independence. Colonial powers imprisoned many nationalists, including Nkrumah and Kenyatta. But demonstrations, strikes, and boycotts eventually forced European rulers to negotiate timetables for freedom. Most African nations won independence through largely peaceful efforts. However, colonies with large numbers of white settlers, such as Algeria and Kenya, were unwilling to grant Africans their freedom. Africans in these colonies were forced to go to war against the colonial powers. Later, you will examine 5 of these nations in detail. Identify cause and effect. How did World War II affect African independence efforts?
Okay. All right, great. We did the reading. Now I want you to go back and I'm gonna show you guys how to outline it correctly, right? Remember I told you to put the headings down? All right, you're gonna put the headings, so starting with the new African nations, and you're gonna see what important information that's gonna help us to understand the independence movement in Africa, okay? Why did it begin in the first place? And why did colonialism start to diminish after World War II, okay? So that's probably gonna help us with this question. So I'm gonna highlight for you, okay? You guys are gonna outline, and then we're gonna go over the question at the bottom. And you guys will continue to do this work independently. I will come around and help you guys out. But first, go ahead and reread it, okay? You should have on your first bullet, your first heading is the new African nations. And we can understand here that World War II sparked a rising tide of nationalism in Africa. So that might be an important thing to write. After the war, most Europeans lacked the resources or will to fight to hold on to colonies. That would be another important bullet that you want to use in your summary, okay? Because remember, we're summarizing, we're building this outline of the text so that we can summarize, okay? Very good. What's another point you think we can maybe focus on in this section here before we get to the next heading? Okay, African nations faced tough challenges. Good, and we're gonna look at some of those challenges later on. Okay, so that's very good. I wanted to show you this here, guys. This is another map where it talks about the changes in the colonial map. So I know they showed a little bit in the video, but you can see how fast and rapid after World War II this independence movement spread all throughout Africa. Okay, this is during imperialism. Okay, this is during the colonial period where, if you notice, the European countries here are on the key. So focus on the British and the French colonies. As you notice, there's plenty of purple, plenty of that right there, and then you'll see as we go into some of these changes, I'm going to slide it through, and we're going to see. Look at the years. This is basically when these colonies began, okay? And then after, when these nations start to gain their independence, take a look at the difference. See the border changes? See even changes in the name, right? We have the Gold Coast and Nigeria, and then next thing you know, next to that we have the Ivory Coast, we have Ghana. You see Mali, Niger, right? Chad. This is all like 1960. Look at the years. Look at how the years in green, they were independent since 1959. They had already formed their new government. Okay, so this is in purple you see by after World War II, these countries, and in red they were the first ones to gain their independence. Not very much red, right? By 1945. All right, but you see South Africa, Ethiopia, Egypt, Liberia, they all had independence by the end of World War II. But after, give it 15 years, and you see all this purple here, and then another 10 years. After that, you see all in green. So a huge movement of independent governments formed, okay? I'm going to show you another a pretty good illustration here. And I know you guys are looking through your book. I know you guys are writing you guys can go on to the next section and outline the next section. I don't have a problem with that. I see you guys are being productive. Okay, take a look here. This is another some pictures. We can see, remember there was a lot of resources there, and whites were basically in charge of the land, and they used unskilled workers, the African, and so there's a lot of tension there, right? You see that the whites are the owners, they're reaping all the benefits, and then the workers and putting in all the effort, they're hardly getting anything. It says Belgium claimed the Congo in the late 1800s. The Congolese were brutally exploited by the colonizers, and demands for independence grew throughout the 1900s. In 1959, riots broke out as demands for independence became more extreme. In 1960, King Baudouin of Belgium recognized independence in a ceremony with Congo's first elected president. So now you see that they're elected, they have democracy. Okay? His name was Joseph Kasavubu. And the celebrations were short-lived, however, as the various groups that made up the Congo differed over how power would be shared. So here's one of the issues. How are they going to share the power amongst the people in a democratic way? Okay? Patrice Lumumba would be the nation's first prime minister. He gave his life in an attempt to create a united Congolese state. So this was not an easy chore. Okay? So let's take a look. They were under harsh conditions. You see that they're rioting by 1959. They're taking over the streets. Here he is, King Baudouin. He met with the president-elect. He's saying, okay, you guys, we're going to transfer power over to the people. And there he is again, and they're celebrating. They're having a good time. And they're saying, hey, we got an independent nation. And there he is, Patrice. He's the new prime minister. And we know, we'll see what happens to him, okay? So let's go back to our reader. Take a look at this. Look at the size and scope of Africa. Look at all these countries that fit inside. You got the United States, China, India. These are probably the most populous nations, China and India. And look at all these European countries that all fit within the African land mass, okay? So you can just see how immense. Look at the population, it's 1.33 billion in 2013. I think it's higher now. There's over 2,000 languages spoken. Okay, you have this chart in your book, okay? The question they ask here is, let's see. Africa is the second largest analyzed information. Is the map accurate? Okay. What does the map tell us? It tells us how big the land is. Okay. Take a look at the geographically diverse continent. We have, you should have been putting some bullets under this heading now. Okay. It has the world's largest desert. It's the Sahara, right? Put that in ring. It has savannas, grasslands. You guys seen Lion King, right? It has fertile coasts, right? These are all part of the land diversity, okay? A lot of fertile areas. 40% of Africans live in growing cities. So there's grasslands, there's rural areas, and then there's urban centers, right? They have rich deposits of minerals, gold, copper, diamonds, okay? That's probably a very valuable resource. They have cash crops, okay? So these are some of the evidence when we're summarizing what makes it diverse, what makes Africa so sought after. Okay, why do people invest there?
Good morning, sir.
Thank you.
She emails these to us.
I got it.
Yeah, in case you didn't print it, I printed it. I make copies. But
Sounds good.
I don't promise I will always do that before class. You know.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. So here we go, guys. So a lot of natural resources. The European powers established colonies to tap into those resources. So here's probably some of those issues, some of those problems. You see these people are probably doing the work. Who's reaping the benefits mostly? Probably not the workers too much, okay? Let's see. Now on our third bullet, or our third heading, we're gonna have to put our bullets under there. It talks about freedom leads to nationalism. So nationalism, they're the ones that organize the political parties, right? They organize the political parties. Many were Western educated, right? They were Western educated, they were organized political parties. And most African nations, through peaceful efforts, it was peacefully done. You see that what happened in Belgium. They did have riots, but you know, you could probably say that was probably a peaceful protest. Okay, you can imagine how did the World War II affect the African independence? So let's go ahead and answer that question underneath those bullet points. So what are we going to write? Okay. All right, cool. Maybe we'll go up here. We'll say all these countries, the World War II sparked nationalism. Okay. And after the European nations, they lacked the resources. So, starting in the 1950s, they gave up direct control of the colonies. So there you go. There's our answer to our question. I've highlighted for you. You guys have these bullets in your outline. You are able to answer the questions. Okay. Go on. You guys are going to work on the next section independently, where it talks about a variety of new governments. Go ahead and work on that. The question at the bottom here says, why did one party rule often lead to the repression of tyranny. Okay, one party rule leads to tyranny. Okay, that's the question that we're gonna try to infer here. And I want you to take a look at this vocabulary word. This is, everybody say coup d'etat. Coup d'etat. All right, perfect. Coup d'etat is the forcible overthrow of a government. Remember we saw that in Burma? We were talking about Myanmar and Burma, how they have went through a coup d'etat recently. I know you guys remember that. So very good. So this is about a forcible overthrow. Okay. All right, you guys go ahead and work on that. And at the end of this section, what we're going to do is we're going to be starting on an essay assignment, and I'll show you guys the requirements for that. Okay, we're going to be looking at a lot of evidences, and I'm going to have a lot of links for you guys. I'm going to print out some newspaper articles, and we'll look at some video. All right, thank you.